Assalamualaikum everyone. It's been a while, actually a really long while, and I kept telling myself that I would come back to YouTube soon. And then soon become weeks and weeks become months. And before I knew it, a lot of time had passed. And the funny thing is, it wasn't because I ran out of things to say. I was actually the opposite because too many things happened and I didn't know where to begin. And for those who don't know, I spent about 2.5 years in Turkey pursuing my master degree. And then when I first left Indonesia, I had this picture in my head of what the chapter of my life would look like. I was going to study hard and finish my degree, build a future. And maybe everything wouldn't be perfect, but I thought I had a rough idea of where life was heading. And looking back now, I think that's the funniest part. Okay, life almost never follows the version we create in our heads. If you had asked me back then what I was worried about, I probably would said my thesis or deadlines or research or surviving graduate school. And I thought those would be the hardest things. Turned out they weren't. The hardest lesson I learned in Turkey had nothing to do with university. They had everything to do with people and with loss. Yeah, not the kind of loss where someone dies, but the kind where the life you imagine slowly disappears in front of you. And toward the end of my time there, things started happening that I never expected. A relationship I genuinely thought had a future suddenly didn't have one anymore. There was a point where marriage didn't feel like a distant possibility. It felt real, close enough to imagine, close enough to plan around. And then, one day, it wasn't. Just like that. And I think what hurt wasn't only losing the relationship, it was losing the future I had attached to it. Because when a relationship ends, sometimes you are not just grieving a person, you are grieving the version of tomorrow that no longer exists. Around the same time, I found myself dealing with something else. People were saying things about me that weren't true. And the strange thing about rumor is that they travel much faster than explanations. I learned that the hard way. Some people listened, some people didn't. Some people asked for my side of the story, others had already made up their minds. And I think that experience changed me more than I realized at the time. Because when people misunderstand you, it hurts. But when people don't even give you the chance to explain yourself, it hurts differently. For a while, it felt like I was constantly defending a version of myself that I knew was real but other people couldn't see. And honestly, that was exhausting. There were days when I would sit alone and wonder why everything felt so heavy. I had gone to Turkey to study, yet somehow I was learning lessons about heartbreak, trust, disappointment, and loneliness. Lessons I never enrolled for. And because I was living far away from home, there were moments when everything felt even bigger than it actually was. You know, those moments happens and all you want is to talk to someone who understands, someone who already knows your story, someone who doesn't need a long explanation, someone who simply gets it. I miss that a lot. There were nights when I wished I could just sit with people who knew me before all of this happened, before life became complicated, before I start questioning things I had never questioned before. And I think that's when I start noticing something. The things that happened weren't only affecting my emotions, they were changing the way I view people. They were changing the way I trusted, the way I connected, the way I opened up. Because after enough disappointments, you start protecting yourself. Not intentionally, it just happens. You become more careful, right? You think twice before sharing things. You stop expecting too much from people. You convince yourself that independence is the safest option. And for a long time, I thought that was strength. I thought being strong meant handling everything alone. But now, looking back, I don't think that's always true. Sometimes it's not strength, sometimes it's survival, and there is a difference. I think that's what trauma can look like sometimes. Not dramatic breakdowns, not obvious signs. Yeah, sometimes trauma looks like a person who smiles and say they are fine, a person who never asks for help, a person who acts like they don't need anyone, not because they don't, but because somewhere along the way they learned that needing people can be painful. And I know this because I become that person for a while. The interesting thing is that after I come back to Indonesia, I expected everything to feel different immediately. I thought maybe changing countries would somehow change everything else too. But healing doesn't work like that. You can leave a place, you can leave a relationship, you can leave a difficult chapter behind. But the lessons, fears, and wants often travel with you. And for a while, I think I was carrying more than I realized. Not just heartbreak, not just disappointment, but the fear that maybe people don't stay, maybe people don't understand, maybe people only know how to love you when things are easy. Thankfully, life has a way of challenging our fears too. Because over time, I start meeting people who stayed, people who listened, people who reminded me that one painful experience doesn't define every future experience. And slowly, very slowly, I start learning something. Healing is not becoming the person you were before everything happened. Because honestly, that version of you doesn't exist anymore. Healing is learning how to move forward as the person you've become. It's learning that you can be hurt and still remain kind. You can be disappointed and still remain hopeful. You can lose people and still believe that good people exist. And maybe that's where I am now. Not completely healed, not completely unaffected, but definitely not where I used to be. I don't think this video has a big lessons. I don't think there is a perfect conclusion either. I just want to share this part of my story because I know I'm probably not the only person who's experienced something like this. Maybe you've lost people too. Maybe you've seen misunderstood. Maybe you've watched planes fall apart right in front of you. Maybe you are still carrying things that happened years ago. If you are, I hope you know that healing doesn't have to happen overnight. And you don't have to pretend that something didn't hurt just because time has passed. Some chapters leave marks, and that's totally normal. The important thing is not letting those marks decide who you become. Anyway, I think that's all I wanted to say today. And thank you for listening. And thank you for being here after such a long time. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye. Assalamualaikum.